Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 83. In today's episode, we're going to talk about controlling chemical exposures with exhaust ventilation. You can have it as a local exhaust, you can have a point of use exhaust, but we're really going to focus in on just how the size of the particle also matters with the exhaust ventilation. And we're going to talk a little bit about fume hoods. So we're gonna kind of switch gears in the podcast and really start to talk a lot about engineering controls and the things that we can do to not torture people to have to wear things like respirators and all that stuff. Let's just dive right in. So when we think about controlling chemical exposures, the lungs have massive surface area. So with the massive surface area, it's generally accepted that particles less than 10 nanometers are going to be respirable. And at about 4 nanometers, about 50% of the particles can be deposited into the lungs, and the rest just never settle out, and then they're exhaled and all that stuff. And then it's into the gas exchange system. So it's very easy for this thing to go through the lungs, to then cross the blood barrier, and then of course now it's traveled throughout the body, and at times it can be deposited in areas of the brain and other areas, and it can also be caught in the liver and the kidneys and all that stuff. Then they do a great job of filtering things out. So we want to do everything we can to keep these out of the bloodstream. Well, out of the lungs, and of course out of the lungs, then it's out of the bloodstream, and then it never enters the bloodstream. So it's a lot safer and healthier for humans. So when we think about how that we're going to capture these particles in, obviously the size is going to play a form in this then, because there's going to be some weight to the size, so that we know when things are really small, like their like nanometer range, up until of course like the micro scale. Um, it's all going to be based on diffusion that dominates versus inertia. You know, it does a really good job of capturing everything. Once it starts to get to the micro scale and it's a little bit farther away from the exhaust, you have a lot less efficiency. But the smaller it is, and of course, smaller is typically a lighter type molecule. It's really going to be caught really good by exhaust ventilation then. So, and this is when we're kind of thinking about how we're just using something right out in the open. This still doesn't mean that what we're doing out in the open is safe, but we know that we're capturing more of the particles. Let's look at if we take the same operation and maybe put it inside of a fume hood then. So a fume hood, of course, is going to be enclosed on 3 of the 4 sides, allowing the person to work in the front. And whatever they're doing, there's going to be glass that can come down on the front, typically, and in the form of a sash. And depending upon what you're really doing with this experiment, a lot of times you can really lower the sash good to really help to pick up that like velocity of air that's going through. Does a very good job of making sure that these not only don't come in contact with humans, but they're not even released out into the workforce. So, and then once these are the exhaust has it, you can either capture it with filters above the system. Most people will just take it and hook it up to the system and exhaust it right through the building exhaust. What you can't do is introduce it back into the regular building exhaust then, because you haven't done anything but spread around the contamination. So everything you do, you have to expel it out of the workplace then. So that is it for episode 83. Nice, short, and sweet. Please do not consider yourself to be an expert. We just really very briefly covered how that we're going to use exhaust to capture these particles. Size and weight plays a tremendous part in this whole thing when we look at just capturing exhaust. When we look at how that we're going to use a fume hood, of course, we do a really good job then of capturing everything. But that also doesn't mean that the human doesn't use sloppy handling with the material, with gloves and all the rest. Then those will be for future episodes. We just want to talk today about how do we keep it out of the workplace and out of the lungs If it's not in the lungs, it can't cross the blood-brain barrier and all the other places in our body. So that is it for episode number 83. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. David Ayers, and have a safe day.